Movies are one of the greatest things ever created in human history. They've inspired us, made us laugh and cry for years on end. They've given us incredible moments. And now it's time to add to the long history. Today, I, Jack Bucket, will be pitching my film idea to you. First, I'll be partnering with legendary director Christopher Nolan because the last time I tried to direct something, it didn't go too well.
What was happening, dude?
Look up that way! Look how far I got!
Read the lines, buddy.
Oh, I thought that was you.
Alright. Stop, Eli.
Our idea is to adapt the famous book, The Devil in the White City by Eric Larson into a major motion picture. The soundtrack of the movie will be scored by composer Ramin Djawadi, who has composed very famous pieces in the past, such as the whole Game of Thrones soundtrack. He also did the original 2008 Iron Man soundtrack, so he is able to show range throughout the film. Before we get to the story, because it's a bit long, but hey, sometimes they're like that. We have to show you the cast and then explain what each character is going to do. The protagonist is going to be Daniel Burnham, the main designer of the Chicago World's Fair, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, who has done Brokeback Mountain, Nightcrawler, and Spider-Man Far From Home.
That is an Avengers level threat.
The second main character is the antagonist, H.H. Holmes, one of the most famous serial killers of all time, played by Cillian Murphy, who has done Inception, Dunkirk, and Peaky Blinders. Now we have our secondary characters, starting with John Wellborn Root, Burnham's best friend, played by John Bradley, who played Sam Tarley on Game of Thrones. Then there is Frederick Lee Olmsted, the old architect, played by Lee Pace. Finally, there is Carter Henry Harrison, the mayor of Chicago, played by Nicolas Coster-Waldau, who infamously played Jaime Lannister on Game of Thrones. Now we get to the long part of the cast, the background characters. Now you may ask yourself, why did you include another like 14 characters? Well, even if the role is small, each plays some part in the story, so let's dive in. First we have Frank Geyer, the end detective, played by Tobey Maguire. Even Spider-Man found himself a role in the film, so we can even celebrate
Pizza time.
After him is Francis David Millett, the director of Fair Functions, played by Nicholas Hammond, who was actually the eldest son in The Sound of Music. Next is Patrick Prendergast, a crazy young man who actually, spoiler, kills the mayor. We have Fionn Whitehead, and he will be playing Prendergast. Then there is Lewis Sullivan, another fair architect, played by Jack Whitehall.
He invited me round to the gym and I went round and these machines are enormous. He had taken all of the weights off all of the machines. So it was just the bars. And even then I was like, I don't think I can manage those.
After him is John B. Sherman, a crazy animal seller, I guess is the best way to put it, played by Willem Dafoe.
Willem Dafoe!
Who infamously played the Green Goblin.
Speak to the devil!
Next is Margaret Burnham, Daniel's wife, played by Laura Carmichael. After her is Benjamin Pietzel, played by Colin Firth, and he becomes a loose end for Holmes after he trusted him during the hotel construction process. After Benjamin is Ned Connor, played by Alfie Allen, and he works/lives with Holmes in his hotel. Then we have George Ferris, played by Martin Starr, who helps to engineer the first Ferris wheel. Finally, we have Emmeline Cigrand, played by Natalie Dormer, and she is one of Holmes' prominent victims. Now that the whole cast is out of the way, we can get to the plot. The film starts aboard the Olympic on April 12, 1912, the same night that the Titanic sinks, and we have Daniel Burnham contemplating his years planning the Chicago World's Fair of 1893, held to honor the 400th anniversary of Columbus's discovery of America. Now we flash back to 1890. Chicago is a rapidly growing city and eager to prove itself. Chicago then wins its bid to host the World's Fair. Soon after, two of the city's leading architects, Daniel Burnham and John Root, are given artistic control over the buildings at the fair. At the same time that Burnham and Root are assembling an architectural team, a young, handsome, blue-eyed doctor by the name H.H. Holmes arrives in Chicago. Holmes is immensely attractive to women because he breaks the traditional rules of courtship. In Chicago, he quickly purchases a drugstore that becomes popular because he attracts female customers. Holmes uses forgery and deception to buy a nearby building, which he converts into a grim hotel. Despite the fact that the building contains rooms and equipment that are clearly designed for murder, Holmes attracts very little attention. From the workers he hires, he assembles a group of accomplices that includes Benjamin Pietzel. Back to Burnham, he and Root painstakingly assemble a team of renowned architects from around the country, including Charles McKinn, Frederick Olmsted, and Lewis Sullivan, and they began to work on their designs for the fair. The group agrees to hold the exposition on the grounds of Jackson Park. Root dies suddenly, and Burnham, while crushed by his friend's passing, resolves to continue working on the fair. Sullivan objects to the neoclassical style of the World's Fair, but the other architects agree to this aesthetic. Olmsted, who designed Central Park in New York, travels around to New York and Europe in search of flowers and exotic boats to decorate the grounds of Jackson Park. In 1897, Carter Harrison, the popular mayor of Chicago, loses his election for a fifth term. This disappoints Patrick Prendergast, a young, mentally ill man who believes that Harrison would have given him a government position in return for his help in Harrison's campaign. In 1893, Harrison wins a fifth term, and Prendergast travels around Chicago claiming that he will be appointed the corporate council. While the World's Fair is being built, Holmes attracts visitors from around the country to his World's Fair Hotel located near Jackson Park. These visitors include Ned and Julia Connor. Holmes cons Ned into taking ownership of his failing drugstore. Holmes also murders Emmeline Cigrand, a beautiful woman who finds him attractive. Though Holmes kills her in his hotel, he attracts very little attention from the lodgers.
Nothing to see here, please!
Burnham, who urges the architects and engineers of America to build a structure that can match the Eiffel Tower, he awards a fair concession to George Ferris, the designer of the first Ferris wheel. Design on the wheel proceeds slowly, and other buildings are damaged by rain and snow. Burnham's friend, Francis Millet, suggests that the buildings be painted white to give them a distinctive appearance that earns the World's Fair the nickname the White City. In addition to the Ferris wheel, exhibits planned for the World's Fair include motion pictures, exotic dancers, and light bulbs. Visitors are shocked, entertained, and awestruck. Buffalo Bill, no, not that one, brings his Wild West show nearby, drawing tourists away from the fair. Burnham argues with the board of directors, which, pressured by the failure of numerous banks in the economic recession of 1893, wants to control all the fair's expenditures. While the Ferris opened in 1893, it loses money at first, but after the Ferris wheel is completed and Millet and others organize entertaining dances and exhibits for the Midway, it slowly becomes financially profitable. Shortly before the end of the fair, Patrick Prendergast shoots and assassinates Mayor Harrison because he's angry that he didn't make his corporate council. This tragedy overshadows the end of the World's Fair. As the World's Fair ends, Holmes sets fire to his hotel in order to collect a large insurance claim. Insurance investigators are skeptical and his creditors chase him out of town. Holmes kills Pietzel and is eventually arrested when another insurance company investigates his death. Detective Frank Geyer follows Holmes' path through Indianapolis and Toronto and uncovers evidence that he has murdered 3 of Pietzel's children. Although Holmes denies these crimes and writes a memoir in which he tries to make himself seem sympathetic, he is sentenced to death. Burnham becomes the greatest architect of his day, and the World's Fair influences American science and culture in uncountable ways. Sitting on the Olympic, Burnham learns that Millet, who was riding on the Titanic on April 12th, has died. Burnham then dies shortly afterwards. He is buried in Chicago, nearby Root, his wife, Sullivan, and Mayor Harrison. Now that the summary is over, we can read a review from the site Rotten Tomatoes. Everyone knows them, the snotty people who really like artsy films and don't like big blockbusters. Like, come on, Infinity War at an 85%? Here is a review done by Sean Monroe, who gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. Jack Bucker, the man behind the idea, and Christopher Nolan, the man chosen to direct this book-to-film adaptation, once again work their magic with the plot, but while the overall aura of the film demonstrates passion, little moments drag it down half a star. Based on the novel of the same name, The Devil in the White City, written by Eric Larson, Nolan stays true to the book and keeps the historical accuracy that Larson gave us in the book. Nolan kept H.H. Holmes' storyline mostly the same, and while some of the girls Holmes killed from history weren't added due to runtime, it didn't take away from the film. Although Nolan does get credit for including background characters such as Ned Connor, the man who worked and lived with Holmes in his hotel. He didn't have to add them, but their inclusions add that little something extra to the film. Holmes' overall plot stays mostly historically intact, with his demise staying accurate, but it's Burnham's story that deviates a bit off course. Buckard and Nolan changed the personalities of some of the characters, such as making some angry architects into comedy extras. He also made the overall fair and ending more joyous than it was in reality, degrading Harrison's murder in the process. He also made the Ferris wheel progress go much more smoothly than it was too. Overall, both Buckard and Nolan succeeded in transferring 2 wondrous stories about an event widely uncovered by history into a successful motion picture that will be remembered for years to come. Actually, one day I do hope this book is turned into a movie or even just a TV series, but hey, we'll just have to wait for that. The Devil in the White City, with every bright light comes darkness.
See you, chump.